Hello, everyone. So I am back with another YouTube exclusive today, and I am talking about metamorphosis and transformation through that spiritual lens. We like to throw those words around a lot in the spiritual community, so I wanted to give it some focus today. I wanted to talk about metamorphosis through an astrological lens, a planetary influence or cosmic influence lens, and then applications on how to work with these windows of opportunity, these times of opportunity for metamorphosis through fixed star magic. So I'm going to take a step back here for a second. I've been on the topic of metamorphosis for a couple months now, primarily because we do have the metamorphosis sponsorship running in our community and group service at Grave Intentions Goods. So that is working with the painted lady from larvae to adulthood, watching the entire metamorphosis, take place in front of our very own eyes and attaching that to a spiritual outcome for the participants. So that's kind of like where this topic originated from, just so you guys know where it came from. But I also did a couple articles for our Substack. I just posted one earlier today about metamorphosis, looking at it through the lens of astrology and fixed star magic. And I realized I love the article, but I didn't give a lot of real meat and potatoes in terms of application. So I thought, you know what? That would be a great YouTube EDU, an exclusive EDU for my YouTube people, on how to actually work with those fixed stars during these periods where you have these activations, where you can sort of transform an energy or a situation, or transcend a situation. So let's jump into it. I made a fancy little EDU for my little spiel today for you guys. So let me pull it on up. This is always the fun part for me. Okay, let's make me decent. And the first time I got it. Yay. So today what I wanted to talk about is the astrology of metamorphosis. So this is, again, using fixed star magic for transformation, right? So we're going to talk about talismans. We're going to talk about timing. We're going to talk about ritual processes. And again, this is just for you folks here on my YouTube. I am in the middle of the 3-pillar series on our Patreon, so you can check that out. It's only $5 a month to join. This month's topic is fixed star magic also. And next month we will be jumping into stellar shamanism. So if this is a topic that interests you, definitely hop on over to our Patreon. All right, so let's get into it today. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, obviously when we talk about metamorphosis, nothing new grows without dissolving the old first. We tend to want to skip that part. In the spiritual community especially, it's like, let's just go from A to Z and forget about B, C, D, E, F, G, blah, blah, blah. No, we can't forget about the in-between. The in-between is very, very important. So when we talk about metamorphosis, we're talking about the first step of that, which is dissolution. Okay, that is, and again, I'm using the butterfly as an example here. The caterpillar doesn't improve, quote unquote, right? It liquefies almost like completely inside that chrysalis before anything new can even begin. So you have this stage of formlessness that comes in, right? And this is a very real stage with no shape at all. And in spirit work, this can be very uncomfortable. It can be disorienting, but it is a necessary stage when we are manifesting change that is deep rooted in our life, or we're doing some kind of shadow clearing, or shadow organization, I guess is a good way to, you don't really clear it, but you organize, maybe moderate it, balance it. And then comes the reorganization stage, right? Using again the butterfly as an example, what emerges isn't a better caterpillar, quote unquote, right? It's a different kind of creature altogether. It's built from that same material, but as we know, it's a butterfly, right? So what I want to talk about first, just to kind of paint the full picture here, is the transits. I want to go through the transits that show when this process activates in your natal blueprint. So you pull out your chart if you have your chart, or, you can save this and then reference it later. But fixed stars that follow in this particular PowerPoint I made for you guys here on YouTube, those fixed stars are going to give you something very tangible to actively work with during these transit periods. So let's talk about these transit periods first, because we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Sometimes I like to do that. All right. So when transformation is active, there are 5 transits in particular that really signal that some sort of metamorphosis is underway, or a window or opportunity for metamorphosis is underway. I always think of, oh gosh, was it Hemingway? I want to say it was Ernest Hemingway who wrote a lot about transcendence. And I remember, and don't ask me how I remember, because I don't even remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, but I remember back in high school in creative writing with Mr. Oberwetter. Isn't that crazy how you can remember this shit that's decades old, but you can't even remember what you did this morning? But we did this like deep dive on Ernest Hemingway, and he's not traditionally somebody I would recommend to the spiritual community in terms of reading his work. But Hemingway had a way of writing about metamorphosis and transformation through the lens of transcendentalism. And so if you're a reader, read Hemingway. Yeah, I know he's not a spiritual quote unquote writer, or part of the spiritual community, but his writing really is spectacular if you're an individual who has a practice that involves any kind of transcendence work. So anyway, let's get back to these transits. These are probably no-brainers for those of you that are, in astrology, but I put these lessons together for the beginner in mind, right? Somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of background information, doesn't really maybe have a lot of knowledge. So if you're already in, moderate or advanced stages, just hang in there. Let's talk about Pluto first. So Pluto is a son of a bitch sometimes, but Pluto dissolves the identity that we've built, right? Around really the identity around anything it touches, honestly. It is a form of death. It is a form of like an identity or self-projected death. It's not a self-improvement, right? It is a complete, when we talk about dissolution, Pluto is dissolution, right? Uranus, or however you want to pronounce it these days, that's the lightning crack, the lightning whip, right? This is sudden. It's unscheduled awakenings, right? It's that chrysalis, again, using the butterfly as an example, that splits before anyone expected it to, right? It's the early blooming butterfly. It's just kind of like, poop, I'm here 3 days early. So Uranus is that kind of sudden jolt when we're talking about metamorphosis. It's almost like forced sometimes, where Pluto is more slow, and it almost has a decaying effect around it, right? Because it's so slow. Obviously the Saturn returns, these are our audit periods in, when we're looking at our natal blueprint. Anything in our lives that aren't built on a real foundation will get quietly dismantled during a Saturn return. And then we have Neptune, of course. Right now we're in Neptune retrograde, which has its benefits and its, headaches, but Neptune is going to dissolve the boundaries between self and other. Okay. Whether the other is a person, an idea, a situationship, but it's kind of like a fog. It's that formlessness I was just talking about before the reorganization can take place. And then we have Chiron, the wounded healer, right? Chiron serves the purpose of revisitation, right? It's revisiting the old wound, the old patterns, the old behaviors, which oftentimes are going to hold that blueprint for what comes next. So what kind of butterfly is coming out of that cocoon? Is it a painted lady? Is it a monarch? Are we a painted lady that wants to be a monarch? So these are the 5 transits that you would look for in your transits and progressions, your profections, in terms of windows of opportunity, the time frames where metamorphosis and transformation is very active, and that we can actually be an active participant in that process. We don't have to just sit by and let things happen. We can engineer some of this. I think we tend to forget that in life in general. All right. So That's where fixed star magic comes in. So fixed stars are like points of concentrated stellar force that are kind of far beyond our solar system. So unlike planets, they hold one fairly stable degree over our entire human lifetime, which makes them like reliable anchors for ritual timing and especially talismanic work. Um, Fixed stars, if you are looking at your astrology online, I like using solar fire. Use whatever program works best for you. But they are aligned to your chart when they conjunct a natal planet or angle. They are aligned to the calendar when the sun crosses their degree each year, and they are channeled usually into a talisman that is consecrated during that window. And so I'm going to break down how to do that in very layman terms, very beginner. So if you haven't worked with fixed stars before, don't worry. I'm going to keep this very, very light, not too heavy. But the 5 stars I want to talk about that are associated with metamorphosis, with transitions that are transformative in nature, transcendence, right? Hemingway. The first one is Algol. Algol is a severance star, right? It is death of the old form. So Pluto, right? Then we have Alcyon, right? This is grief or grieving that clears the way. So I kind of think of Chiron with this one too. Then we have Spica. Okay, that's refinement of the new form. We have Regulus, which is the fall before the rise. And then we have Deneb Elgeti, if I'm pronouncing that right. Who knows? But you know what I'm reading the letters and sounding them out. It's sacrifice for something larger. This is more of like a kind of like a worldly interconnective, like, the greater collective type fixed star that we work with. But let's jump into how you can work with these 5 specifically. All right, starting with Algol here. So Algol is located in Perseus. It's traditionally really the most feared fixed star in the sky. And so the nature of this fixed star is severance. It is ego death, okay? So it's the end of the mental structure running the show. It is taking ego and kicking it back into the back seat or into shotgun. It's not allowed to drive the vehicle anymore. So it's best for if you're cutting some sort of identity feature out, some sort of role, a habit of thought, especially that has become like a prison in your life. So a lot of times people who work with Algol are coming out of very destructive codependent relationships. They're trying to overcome some sort of addiction or fixation, because again, the mind the mind is such a powerful tool. It's the most powerful manifestation tool we have, and your thoughts will dictate outcomes. I don't care how many candles you're burning, how many spiritual baths you're taking. If you're letting your mind run wild with what ifs, you're going to end up manifesting some shit you don't like. So Algol is good for getting that under control too. The timing for working with Algol: Sun conjunction, right? Roughly that's going to be between May 16th and 19th, and primarily on a waning or dark moon is the preference here, right? The materials you would use for this particular casting, if you're working with Algol, I would recommend a black candle, maybe an iron nail or an iron blade, a small mirror, and maybe some black thread. And let me tell you what the process would be for this fixed star magical casting, whatever we want to call it here. So the process: I would write down that identity, that role, that habit that you are trying to sever. Okay, write it down on a small piece of paper. Now, I want you to sit before that mirror by candlelight with your black candle, and I want you to speak that out loud once, very plainly. Nothing special here. Our words are sacred. Sacred sounds, sacred syllables, very Buddhist tradition here, right? I'm an omnis, so I incorporate different traditional systems into one omnis system. But sit before that mirror with the black candle burning and say this out loud. And then I want you to cut the paper cleanly in half with that iron blade or that iron nail. Okay, so that might take a minute. And then I want you to burn or bury both halves of that before dawn breaks. Do not keep a copy. Okay, so we're really not making a talisman here, but kind of, it's like an invisible, intangible talisman. But really what you are doing is you are calling out to the entity or energetic sourcing of Algol to help. It's almost like a cut and clear. Whatever you are trying to sever that is part of your identity or role or habits that is causing harm. And you need to rise above it. You need to transcend. You need to transform that energy into something benefic. All right, our next one here is Alcyon. It is the brightest of the Pleiades. It is grief as a threshold, not a dead end. And so the nature of Alcyon is mourning. Okay, mourning that really clears space for what comes next in our life, right? So it's kind of like release. And part of release is acknowledgement and embracing something that may be very difficult so that we can let it go, so that we can put it down. It's best for transformations that are born of loss rather than choice. And really with Alcyon, a lot of times for my clients, it quite literally is the death of a parent, a child, a pet. It could be the loss of a job that you've had for 10, 15 years. It encompasses a very uniform, theme of grief and grieving the loss of something that was very important. The timing, Sun conjunction, of course. This is going to be roughly May 21st through 23rd, or when the Pleiades culminate at midnight. Materials I would use for this particular casting: a bowl of water, a silver coin or moonstone, and a white cloth. And so the process of this particular casting, let me move myself here. Oof, there we go. I would sit with the bowl of water and name out loud specifically what was lost. What is it that has caused this grief? And then I would drop that silver coin or that moonstone into the water. Now, I would stay seated until the water is completely still again, because it's going to have little ripples and bubbles when you drop it in. Okay, so just stay seated until that is completely still again. Then I want you to wrap the stone in the white cloth and carry it. I want you to carry it with you as your grief work talisman. So this is very specifically a talisman, and it's very tangible. A lot of people ask me, well, how does that work? Well, you gave this stone or this coin an identity. It is what was lost. And now you are going to carry that with you. And energetically, you are going to be releasing that sourcing that is going to be fed through that talisman. It is going to help you to facilitate that. So a nice, very simple, very easy kind of beginner's entry point in working with fixed stars for metamorphosis. Then we have Spica. So Spica's in Virgo. It's one of the most benevolent fixed stars. It really governs refinement. I kind of think of Venus sometimes when I think of Spica. But the nature of Spica is grace. It is skill. It is growth. Once the old form is gone, right? So it's like almost like a new beginning-ish type of grace, skill, and growth. It's best for kind of nurturing a new form or a new energetic source or outlook after that demolition stage is complete. You got to get rid of that old, right? You got to destroy it. You got to make sure it's destroyed. So you're not having to go back and repeat the process over and over. The timing here, sun conjunctions, again, you guys, sun conjunctions with all of these fixed stars, but this one is roughly October 16th through 18th during a waxing moon. And then the materials I would use for this cast would be maybe a handful of grains or seeds, a green or maybe a copper thread, and then a small cloth pouch. And the process for it, pretty simple. You're going to hold the seeds and you're going to state plainly what you want this new form to grow into, this new energy, this new outlook. What are you embodying? What are you planting? What do you want to harvest? Okay. And then I want you to bind the seeds inside the pouch, and I want you to wrap that with that copper or green thread. Then I want you to plant a portion of the seeds. I guess take half the seeds. Sorry, I should have been clarifying that. Bind half the seeds inside the pouch with the copper or the green thread. Then plant the other half of the seeds outdoors, or maybe like in a pot as a living talisman, maybe on your porch, in a window, somewhere you can kind of like look at it every day, right? And then keep the rest in the pouch that you have until the planted seeds visibly sprout. I think once your planted seeds, that living talisman, start sprouting, you're probably at the point where you've rolled through, that kind of planting before the harvest process, and you might not necessarily need to keep that pouch with you anymore. But once they're visibly sprouting, that is like a very good indication that the universe has karmically blessed you and you are going to have a harvest from this new energetic sourcing. All right, moving on. Again, I'm trying to keep it simple for, people who are new to this. Regulus, right? Heart of the lion. Okay, success that must be humbled before it will last, really, honestly. So the nature of Regulus is this hard one. It makes me think of Saturn sometimes. It's like this durable transformation that's earned through the fall, right? That precedes the rise. You have to you have to hit bottom before you can climb up sometimes. And that is a hard won battle, allowing ourselves to fall, because nobody likes falling, right? And we try to stop ourselves and slow ourselves down. And we're always telling ourselves, well, I can get control of this. And then things just get more out of control. So it is a Regulus kind of represents that hard won, durable transformation that has been earned through that fall that has to precede the rise. It has to, you guys. So it's best for ambitions that need to be tempered before they can really hold weight. And the timing here, of course, is the Sun conjunction, which is roughly next month, August 22nd through 24th, at the Leo Virgo cusp typically. And then the materials I would use for this one is like a gold colored coin or thread, maybe a small box. And then I like garnets or citrines if available. Try to get some of those, or both. I actually have a citrine in my yogini piercing right here, and I have a garnet one that I wear here too. So, and I swatch, it's funny because I swatch them out depending on what my transits are doing. So it's interesting. Anyway, moving on. I go off on these weird tangents sometimes. All right, the process for this Regulus casting. Get back on track, Michelle. I want you to write the goal or the ambition that you are pursuing. Write it in very plain language. It doesn't have to be, the universe knows. A lot of people sometimes are like, well, how did you say this and did you say that? I'm like, well, number one, the universe is not slow. Okay, it gets it. I don't really have to say anything. The universe knows what's going on. It's watching, it knows what's going on. But yeah, if you're going to be writing things and speaking things, you don't got to go overboard and get crazy. The universe knows what you're saying, but write it out, write it in very plain language. You don't got to exaggerate anything or go wild here. Fold that paper around the coin. And if you are using a garnet or a citrine or both, around the stone. So put those stones or a stone with that coin, wrap it. And then I want you to box it, put it in that little small box. You can use like an old little jewelry box or something, and then set it aside untouched for one full lunar cycle because you want it to absorb. Then you're going to reopen it only after the cycle to see whether the ambition still feels true to you or not. And so you'll be surprised if after that lunar cycle, there might be a big shift on how you're perceiving things. But that is an absorption period required before you revisit that ambition and see if it's been fed or if maybe the universe has given you some way to alternatively view that ambition. So I like this one. I like this one if I'm on the fence about something that I am planning to work towards. It's very eye-opening. Then we have Deneb El-Gedi. All right, so that one's in Capricorn Aquarius. It is sacrifice for a cause larger than the self. So this is more about the collective, if we're doing some collective work. So the nature of Deneb El-Gedi is transformation that is carried not just for yourself, but for a wider community or cause. So it could be like a community service or a group service or something for the world collective, right? Or for a whole family line, if you're doing lineage work, ancestral work, and you're targeting multiple generations. It is best for change that you are undertaking in service of something beyond your own life. So this is something This isn't something, a fixed star you're going to work with because you want to win the lottery. This is a fixed star you want to work with because you want to help find a cure for a horrible disease. You want to help a line of 6, 7, 8 generations of individuals overcome maybe some cross conditioning with karmic debt. You're working towards a greater good that would help multiple people outside of yourself. You're praying for rain. Yeah, something like that, right? So timing, of course, sun conjunction, you guys, that's roughly going to be in February between the 12th and the 14th. And then the materials for this one, I recommend black thread, a small darker stone. I would use maybe obsidian or tourmaline, and some plain paper. And then the process is pretty simple. If I can find there we go. Again, you're going to write down what you're willing to release for the sake of the larger cause. Oh, that was weird. There was just a glitch with my computer. So anyways, write down what you want to release for the collective or for that group of people that you are working with or for. You're going to, it's interesting. If you do jar work, I have a community service jar altar. I have honey pots. I have souring pots. I use prosperity apples and silver lemons. I do a lot of this, and it's to serve a community of people. Sometimes when we bring group energy in, it amplifies everything for everyone. It's like that spiritual dynamite we need sometimes. This is a great fixed star to work with in community and group services, and especially in jar work. I just think that it has a phenomenal impact in terms of amplifying those manifestation requests. Anyways, moving on. For this one, you've written down what you're willing to release. You're going to fold that paper around the stone, and you're going to bind it with that black thread. So just tie that black thread around that. So then you're going to carry it on your person for 1 full week as a working reminder. It's an energetic reminder. It's going to keep you on track. It's going to keep you streamlined. And then you're going to release it at the week's end. Okay, I would do burial. If you can't do burial, maybe some moving water like a stream, or maybe give it away. Maybe you're going to gift it. The other thing, like I said, if you're doing community group service, if you have a jar altar, you can actually put this in your jars, whatever, I would do one of the honey jars, like the prosperity jar or the relationship jar. I would probably do a prosperity jar. Keep it in there for 1 lunar cycle and then remove it. But yeah, that's another way to incorporate this fixed star. All right, so choosing your star. So match the star to the stage of metamorphosis that you are actually in. So don't just pick a star because you think it's cool. You want it to match the energetic, a storyline of where you're at in this process. So if you need something to end completely, that's algol. You need to close something out. You got to detach it. You got to wash it out, wash it away. If you're grieving still a loss that really started this whole metamorphosis in the first place, that is Alcyon. Now the old form is gone, and now you need to grow. That is going to be where Spica comes in. Now, after you've gone through Spica, your ambition needs humility before it can last. Okay, that's Regulus. And then lastly, when you're changing for something bigger than yourself, that's Deneb Elgeti. So make sure that you're matching that fixed star with where you are at in the process. You don't want to get ahead of yourself, because then you're going to have to backtrack anyway and just do it over. All right, so what did I put here on the back page? All right, so nothing new grows without agreeing to stop what was there in the first fucking place, right? Is that not the truth of life? We cannot grow something new in a garden that is overrun with old weeds and broken down rhubarb and shit. You got to clean that shit out. What was has to go so you can make room for the new. And ask yourself if you want to try this process, which one of these stars really match where you are right now, and be honest with yourself, right? That's sometimes hard for us to do. This does require a little humility. So if you do want some assistance with this, I do a lot of very creative omnistic astrological deep dives with people into their natal blueprints. So if you visit the website, I'm more than happy to do that for you. I already have a lot of listings up in our astrology section, but I also have where you can book your private one-on-one lives with me, and we can do this in real time on Zoom. And sometimes that's easier for people to do it that way, but whatever works for you if you do need help. If you already know what you're doing, you know what your natal blueprint is, great. Then find where you're at in this process and start using these fixed stars to really help facilitate this process. All right, let me move my we're going to stop share. So anyways, that was my YouTube exclusive this week, you guys, is just giving you some tools for your toolbox. Again, I've been on this theme, this kick of metamorphosis and transformation and transcendence because of our conjure butterfly garden that we have right now here with Grave Intentions, which I mean, they're amazing. I have a few that are already starting to cocoon, which is wild. They're about 4 days ahead of schedule, but they were big boys. They were eating a lot. So they're kind of expediting their own growth here. But anyway, that is it. If you guys have any questions, anything whatsoever, always feel free to reach out to me. Sometimes I do get busy and I can't reach back right away, but I usually always come full circle at some point and I get in touch with you. But stay magical, you guys, and stay cool too. It's hot out there.